Hello everyone! So spring has sprung and the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that my hair is a different colour. Not that any of my students noticed, well, apart from one who said to me, Jen, why is your hair grey? We'll just leave that there. I have another fantastic guest up for you now. Take a listen.
My name's Nicola Davies and I'm an author for children. My background is in zoology. I trained as a zoologist, a field zoologist, so I studied wild animals in the wild, bats in Pembrokeshire, sperm whales in various parts of the world, humpback whales in Canada, all sorts of things. And now I write books, but I've been doing that for a long time. I write all sorts of books. I write poetry, I write picture books, I write novels. Just finished a massive novel, longest thing I've ever written. But they all have their toes in some way in the natural world and human relationships with nature.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I don't know anyone else that has ever done zoology. I remember being told about it in school and thinking, say what? That's crazy. So growing up then, how did those worlds, kind of collide for you? Was it always about animals?
It was always about animals. Always, 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 always. I had a father and a grandfather who were both obsessive gardeners and very, very good naturalists. So my father had trained as a biologist, and I think if it hadn't been for the war intervening, he probably would have followed a similar career path to mine. But okay. The child of a working class family from a little town in the valleys, there weren't that many opportunities. So actually he became a health inspector and then a food technologist. The great claim to fame of my family is that my father invented butterscotch Angel Delight. So
are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. We ate a lot of processed foods when I was a child. My father's experiments, he'd bring them home. So we had all sorts of weird things. I remember one time he was working on the flavours for toothpaste. There used to be a thing called Punch and Judy toothpaste, well before your time, which had sugar in it, marvellously. And it came in different flavours. And my father was developing the flavours for this toothpaste. So he brought home all these little prototypes with all kind of weird flavours, including cheese flavour.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I never tried it though because I didn't like cheese when I was a little kid. So,
I'm not sure. Isn't that weird?
Isn't that weird? But because my grandfather and my father were so keen on gardening and nature, and they were good sort of basic naturalists, I think that introduced me to it. And my siblings were much older than me, so I didn't have other kids to play with. I was in the garden.
Yeah.
And I remember those early memories of being in the garden, looking at flowers, looking at insects, lifting stones and watching the ants, my grandpa finding birds' nests for me, the absolute deep excitement and joy of that I remember so vividly. So I don't think it was really, there was never really another career path that beckoned quite so strongly as that, except perhaps art. Pictures. It's always been really important to me.
Amazing. So did you used to draw the things that
I did. Saw? I used to draw things, but I was a very kind of idealistic, earnest teenager, and I decided that I couldn't go and do an art degree because art was bourgeois and only rich people supported artists.
Okay.
That wasn't morally acceptable. But it took me 40 years, but I eventually got back to it. And actually, this book, I've written, I don't know, 60, 70 books, but this is the only one that I've illustrated, which came out last year. So I finally got my courage together to illustrate it. And it was really good fun.
Look, oh my goodness. How brilliant, though, that you've managed to combine two things that, in my mind, creating a book, creating a world, and then the actual world. I mean, how awesome to combine the two of them together.
I really, really love stories, and I really, really love words. And although my parents they both came from very kind of ordinary working class families.
Yeah.
What was special about the families that they came from, they were Welsh families.
Yeah.
Where music and words were really, 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 really important.
Yeah.
And so I grew up with that. So I can remember my dad knew lots of poems by heart. So I could sit on the side of the bath in the morning while he'd be reciting Keats to me when I was tiny. So that the pattern of words has always been really
important. And that's the thing, like you say, you know, it's always there. And what's brilliant about the creative arts is it's not a time scale thing. You know, it's not like, oh well, you know, you're a bit too old to be doing that now, you're a bit too, well, you can't, you know, it's not about retraining. Once it's in you, it's something that you can, you know, you can delve into at any point and at any moment. It really can, you know, and you can find things that resonate with you and you go, oh my goodness, I could write about that, I could sing about that, I could, you know. And it's insane.
And even all you're doing, even if you're doing it for yourself or your family, that's the fact that you're doing it. It's the process. It's the process that's important. I mean, having said that, you know, I have had to make my living doing it. So, you know, the end result has been quite important and quite essential. But it took me, you know, a good. Once I did start writing, so I was a television presenter for quite a long time as well. But once I'd started writing, it took me sort of 10 years to be able to have it as my sole job. You know, I had to do lots of other things alongside of it. And I think that process is pretty standard. And you know, some people never have it as their main job. It's always a sideline. I've been really lucky that I can now spend all my working time doing something creative, which is fantastic.
Wonderful. And how important do you think it is that you started out in life doing something like zoology to then become a writer? You know, what kind of, is it the seeds of, you know, little trickles of things that you think, oh, I can pull that from this, or do you think, you know, it doesn't really matter?
I think for me it was really fortunate for two reasons. First of all, just from the inspirational, you know, I have something I want desperately to communicate. And of course, you know, there are 20 million different species on this planet, and every single one of them has got at least 10 interesting stories to tell about them. So I'm never going to run out of real things to retell anytime soon. So that's one thing. But the other thing is it gave me, you know, a foot in the door against the competition, other people trying to get into publishing, because I had a skill and I had expertise. And in fact, my first book came about because I was asked to be a scientific consultant on a picture book about blue whales. And the two guys who were doing it, there's a writer and illustrator. To be honest, I think they were mostly consulting their drug dealer, because the stuff they were writing and the stuff they were illustrating was like, what? Really? I don't think so. So in the end, I'd sent this text and these pictures back to the editor, you know, for the 10th time, saying, actually, this is none of it's true.
It's total drivel. Yeah.
It's frankly total drivel. The editor turned round to me in the end and said, just go away and write it. Yeah. And I knew an illustrator who was a friend who was doing lots of editorial work for magazines and newspapers, but desperately wanted to write children's books. And this is how long ago it was. I sent him a fax of some blue whale photographs and said, if you can get some artwork onto this desk of these by Monday, then you're in the chance.
We're in.
And that's how our first picture book came about. And he is now very, very successful picture book illustrator.
Wow. That is amazing. That is awesome. Really nice. And I bet there's so many, I was about to say, I bet there's so many stories like that of things that just kind of happen, and just by chance you were in the right place at the right time there, you know?
Sometimes there's a certain amount of that. There's a certain amount of being quite driven. I am driven.
Yeah.
And I work. But as far as I've done a lot of picture books, but the collaborative process of producing a picture book with an illustrator is just glorious. It's really really lovely. And I have illustrators now have become friends because we've worked together. Some of the books that I've done for Graphic, who were based near Swansea, I've done with a fabulous illustrator called Kathy Fisher, and that meeting was one of those, being in the right place at the right time. I was having treatment for a shoulder injury, and it was excruciating, and I was looking up at anything to try and take my mind off the pain. And there was a picture on the wall of the therapist's room, and I was looking for an illustrator for a text I'd written about the birth of a disabled child. And I said to the therapist, "So who did that picture?" And she said, "Oh, that's my mate Kathy." And that's how Kathy and I met. And we met in a cafe in Monmouth, and after 10 minutes felt like we'd known each other all our lives. Right. So now we collaborate a lot and talk about our work a lot. And I will write things specifically for Kathy's illustrative voice. That's lovely. And at the moment I'm working on a collection of poems with a fabulous illustrator called Petr Horacek, who's originally from Prague, and he's just wonderful. And we've worked together a lot before, but this time round, rather than me writing and then him taking my words and doing pictures, and doing it the other way around. So he's doing pictures and I'm writing things for his pictures.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't imagine that happens quite that often.
No, I don't think it does. I don't think it does. But it's lovely. It's and because it's a poetry collection, it's not like I've got to construct a narrative. We can jump all over the place with the ideas and the images, and that's really lovely, really really lovely for both of us.
Amazing. So how important do you think it is to bounce ideas off of other people, or are you very much, when you've got an idea in your head, you run with it until kind of you feel like it's complete?
The process of writing, the actual process of writing, is necessarily, for me, solitary. And I do know people who write collaboratively, and it's a complete mystery to me. I don't know how anybody would do that. But I think that's because I'm naturally quite a solitary person. So yeah, when I've got an idea, I pursue it, develop it, think about it, cook it until it's nearly, until I pretty much think it's done. And then I have people who I will run past it. And I mentioned Jackie Morris, who lives just over there, who's a great friend. So Jackie and Kath, I'll run it past. They're very often my first audience for things these days. In lockdown, I was writing this long novel, longest thing I've ever written, for a wonderful Welsh publisher called Firefly, who actually won Independent Publisher of the Year, I think, recently. Wonderful. They're fabulous. But it was the biggest thing, as I say, at least sort of 40,000 words longer than anything I've written before. And my first audience for that, I read it as a series of episodes, Dickens style-y, to Jackie and Kathy and Kathy's daughter Molly. And that I've never done that before. And that experience of reading a story to an audience as it develops was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was really, really enjoyable, and always the problem, I think, for creative people is the interior voice that says, "You're rubbish, you're crap,
always,
you can't do this."
Yep.
And I think that's particularly the case for women.
Yeah.
So, but the experience of reading as I was going along, and seeing the effect it had on an audience, made me able to say to that little voice of doubt and that little destructive internal voice, "Shut up.
Yeah, you know nothing. You know nothing." Yeah.
great.
Yes, I neither need nor want your opinion, so
Yes.
please.
I don't want that. Just not. I'm not listening.
Yeah. I was going to say, when you said about being, solitary, and kind of when you create, it's about your idea, and going through that process on your own. I 100% understand that. It's very hard for me personally to give over the reins to somebody else. I mean, obviously we will create in very different ways, but I write scripts for my company to perform, and I don't ever ask for any advice on any scripting at all. And then when we get to the rehearsal room, obviously I hand it over to the company and we workshop it and we work on it. And I love having feedback from the company and them saying, I love these words, but can I just do it like this? And they might not even change the word. Sometimes obviously we do change the words, but they might not change the words. They just interpret it differently to how you always envisaged. And oh my goodness, it's just, that's wonderful. That I love that collaborative
The
effort.
collaborative process of working with a director and actors. I haven't done it very many times, but it is the deepest delight. It's absolutely fantastic. And interestingly, it's taught me a lot about picture books. Because most of the theatre things I've done with music as well, and the action and the music, and what the fantastic things. I love actors. The fantastic things that actors do with your words. It's like the illustration. It's like illustration. But the difference is, with an illustrated book, you have somebody can read a book and they might take ages looking at the picture.
Yeah.
And then they'll turn the page, which is the scene change, right?
Yeah.
And then they might go back.
Yeah.
With theatre, they've got to get it.
Yeah. There and then.
So you've got to unpack in a way, in a different way,
Absolutely.
in the way you communicate the information and the narrative in a picture. So actually, I've loved that process, and I'm going to do it again this summer. So that'll be really
amazing. I was going to ask actually if you'd ever written a piece that was performed.
Several times. So several adaptations of my books. I did a book of mine called The King of the Sky, which is about an Italian family coming to Wales in the 1920s. Now out in a Welsh edition, which is very good.
Wow, that's very cool.
It's very cool. It was adapted for theatre with Pontardawe Arts Centre, and worked with a lovely theatre director and a fantastic group of actors and musicians. So that was lovely. And then another couple of things that have also been done. But my book, The Promise, that was made into an animation last year. And that's
very cool.
That was really exciting. But it was going to be an opera.
Oh my goodness.
This year. And I've done a couple of community operas before, working with kids to develop a libretto. So this time we're using that story, my story, as the basis, and then we'll do the development work with a group of kids in Cumbria, and then perform it at outdoor venues. So that'll be fantastic. Doing opera libretti is the best fun you can have with your clothes on. It's brilliant.
Yes.
I did a community opera with a group of kids with two schools in northeast London ages ago now, and we were doing the story of Boadicea.
Okay.
And we got the kids to be two different tribes, and there was this group of little girls who were being sassy tribeswomen and doing these fantastic actions, and they came up with some really, really, really brilliant words. And then watching those kids work with very talented musicians to turn their words into performed music pieces. The empowerment for those children was, it literally grew 2 inches, all of them. It was
absolutely.
totally wonderful.
Do you know what? It's one of the best things to do. It's so rewarding working with children, massively rewarding. But when you get a team together, like you say, you've got somebody who's written something, somebody else who's massively talented in music or dance or something, and you all work together and you all throw your kind of like creative energy at these kids, and to see what they come back with, it's like it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And the amount of times, some of the kids have said to me, Jen, I've gone home and I've looked at the script and I love it. It's great. But what I've done with my character is I don't think she's really like that. I really think I'm going to do it like that. It's like, okay.
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that just complete? So you must be missing that terribly at the moment.
Hugely, because the thing is, we do group acting sessions online, but they have to be small acting sessions because there's just on Zoom, it's just a nightmare with feedback and all sorts of stuff. But I'm writing at the moment, they desperately wanted a murder mystery. So I'm writing a murder mystery, and as I go along, I feed it to them. So we're on the second part now, and they're loving it, and they keep saying to me, oh, I don't know who did it, and they're so excited. They're teenagers as well, which again is so hard to get kids of that age interested in anything else apart from their phones and technology and which celebrity is who and all this jazz. So the fact that these kids are invested in the characters, in the plot, in and they're going home and they're coming off the call and their parents will send me a message and say so and so's now written a whole new plot line because they think their character, they've dug deeper into this character and that character.
Oh my gosh, what they're learning from that process is there's so many really important transferable skills. They're learning empathy, they're developing their literacy and communication skills, and then of course the whole process of the production has to be collaborative. So you have to learn to work with other people. And when you hear sort of mostly Tory, I have to say, politicians standing on their hind legs and kind of cutting arts budgets, you just think, are you stupid or what?
Because this is a people
teaching tool.
And I think as well, people will say to you, oh, this is my life, and lots of people go, oh, for goodness sake, get a grip. And I'm like, yeah, but it actually is. That actually, the creative arts in general actually is thousands of people's livelihoods as well as their lives. It's not just about something that they earn money from. If you take that away from them, you're taking part of them, and you're then getting kids are missing out on this fundamental huge part of what could be their life, and you're denying them that joy. It's not a privilege. This is not a privilege. This is something that has to happen. And there are people out there that will not get the same thing as I had, and I'm actually only 15 years older than half of these kids, and you think, how is this possible? How are you? So for me, it's all about inclusion. It's all about, some of the parents say to me, we've done so many stage calls, Jen, and my kid's never had a solo. And I'm like, damn it, if she wants a solo, she's having a solo, because we will work so hard for her to get to the best point that she can be, and she's rocking it, she's owning it, she's and I think you have to give them that sense of achievement, that sense of, and build that confidence.
Absolutely.
You go through life and people will shatter your confidence time and time and time again. You've got to have somewhere, a safe space for you to express how you feel, and for somebody to go, I've got you, we can do this together, and I promise you this will be brilliant in whatever shape or form it takes.
And to find your voice, voice.
It's so important. Massively important. And I think what I think lockdown maybe has done for a lot of people has gone, do you know what, this is a time where we can really collaborate, and there are so many people out there that I didn't even know existed, and that let's in the next couple of years, let's all work together. And can you imagine what it's going to be like when we're finally allowed to, it's like release, isn't it, when we're finally allowed to go out, and
it's going to feel fantastic. It's going to feel phenomenal to actually be work with live humans.
People that are actually there. I know. I know. Absolute madness. So is there a particular book or project that you are unbelievably proud of that might stand out from maybe some of the other things that you've done, or can you just not pinpoint one thing?
I think probably, hang on a second, I'm going to dive to the other side of the room because I haven't got it on my desk. Hold on. And grab it. Oh, here we go. So the book that I was mentioning has been made into an animation.
Yes.
It is this book. The animation is up on the BBC website, on BBC Idea website. And it's a story about a street child who has nobody and nothing. And one of the things that's really important to me in my writing is to write about kids who are in a really difficult situation.
Yeah.
And not to make everything magical and they are the seventh son of the seventh son and the the one comes up with, or none of that.
Yeah.
I want to show kids who get through their difficulties with kind of ordinary powers of resilience and invention and creativity. And so this story is a story of empowerment, but it's also got a really, really powerful environmental message because it's about planting and it's about the transformatory effect of tree planting, particularly I'll show you one of these lovely pictures.
Wow, beautiful.
Particularly in urban environments.
Yeah.
And it's of the books that I've written, it's very, very close to my heart because it does speak to so many different people. It's been translated into lots of different languages. It speaks around the world. And because now we have an impact campaign associated with the animation that's going to allow us to partner children with organisations that will empower them to take ecological action in various different ways and reconnect kids in urban areas with nature.
Wow, that's amazing. And how wonderful, I think, for somebody who is creative to create something and then for things to happen because of what you've created. I mean, that surely, for everybody who creates something is the dream, the goal, for you to get your message out there and for that to then be transpired into so many different other projects, so many other different avenues. It's like one big corridor.
You must see this with your writing and your work in theatre, is that when you mentioned about letting things go earlier. And there's a point at which you do let it go, isn't there? And actually that's a wonderful thing. It's like having something in your hand that's got wings and you just go. And once it's out in the world, then it has that story, that whatever it is that you've created has a life of its own, has relationships with its audience of its own that are quite separate from you. And I think that's absolutely one of the most wonderful things. And I deliberately write open-ended stories so that my readers can take ownership of that story and write themselves in their heads. And so that when kids ask me what happened to that character or why isn't that character got a name, or I'll say, I don't know, what do you think? And that's,
I think it's one of the best things.
It's like a theatre process, isn't it?
Hugely.
You're producing a script and then you're saying to these kids, well, I don't know, what do you think about that bit?
And it's wonderful to hear everybody's different interpretation. It's like going to watch a play, reading a book, looking at a picture, a painting, what is one person's kind of adventure is another person's kind of terror, is somebody else takes something completely different from it. And I think, you obviously, when you create, have an ideology about what you want this to represent and what you want this to stand out as, if you like. But then to hear somebody else say, oh my goodness, really, I totally didn't see it like that, is genius, is magic. It's like, how have I created something that was so one track in my mind and then everyone else is going,
has another meaning to somebody else.
Hugely
absolutely
important and amazing, absolutely amazing.
What age group do you work with, Jen?
What age group? So our main company is 8 to 16.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's our main company. We are mainly kind of 12 plus. We have a couple of kind of younger ones, and it's wonderful. Everyone says to me, how on earth does that work? How do you do that? But I've always done that. I've always done it. When I set up my first group at 14, I was 14, our youngest was 10, and our eldest was 18. And people were like, how at 14 were you writing things for people older than you? And I was like, I don't know. We just gelled as a company. It was a different type of work than the work that I do now, because obviously I'm not in the shows that I write now. I'm not part of it. But I think because I was part of it, I learned the little nuances that you see and you create, which as an adult I wouldn't have had that experience and opportunity if I hadn't have done it when I was younger. I wouldn't see, I wouldn't have experienced those things. So when the children say back to me, oh, how do you know that that's what was going on? And I was like, because I've been there. And when you're writing and you're in that position as well, it's unlike anything else. And I missed out on loads of parties and loads of things like that when I was growing up, because I chose not to go, because I wanted to develop this little idea, this little seed. And I'm so thrilled that I did, because it just lends itself now. When I sit down and I write for the kids that I've got in front of me. And I think to be able to do that, it's wonderful, because I know that this child here has got this in them, and I can add that into this character. And I can, I love doing it.
Really lovely.
Yeah, I do. And they're so funny, because when we do our first read through, and we're all sat together and they open the script for the first time and they don't know anything about the character, I've given them a little synopsis about the show as an overall kind of picture, and they open their script and they're all excited and they start reading, and then you can see the little smirks and then the raucous laughter, and it's like, I knew it. I knew I had said person's humor off to a T, because I've worked with them. I know what they find funny, so if they find it funny, they can portray it so much better than a child that's like, I don't really get that. It's not their sense of humor, they can, you play to their strengths, you play into their hands. And I always give them a challenge. Sometimes you can see they're a bit like, oh, this is quite hard, but I think that's massively important too, to kind of develop their skills, constantly learning always, but to play to their strengths and to know where they sit, and to know what makes them tick just a little bit. It's wonderful.
You must have done quite a few sort of generations of kids now.
Yeah, I have.
Get back to it soon.
Oh gosh, so
properly.
Please, I know, please. Honestly though, the children would love to work with you. I know for a fact that they would love hearing about, your stories and everything else. And we should definitely kind of try and combine. It.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yes. Let's do it. So do you write with a pen and paper? Are you a laptop gal? How do you do it?
A bit of both. I've got a lot of notebooks. So there are notebooks, the notebooks that have pictures in. And there are that are specifically for books. And then there are notebooks that have pictures in that are just for getting my brain into the right place for working. So
look at that. It's beautiful.
Pictures kind of helps to get my brain
in the zone.
And I think that's something that everybody has to find for themselves. And then there are incredibly scruffy notebooks that are just for first drafts of poems, first lines of things, sort of idea flows, what happens in what order, all that kind of stuff. I've got post-its up on my walls, but then quite early on it goes onto the computer, just because it's just editing is so much
so much easier.
So much easier. And then there's another stage, if there's an illustrator involved, is that I finish a text, decide who the illustrator is going to be, or maybe I knew who the illustrator was going to be at the start, and then there's a bit of toing and froing with the text then to accommodate what the illustrator wants to do. I mean, sometimes the text doesn't change at all, and sometimes it changes just a little bit, because an illustrator might want to say more or that an illustration says something that makes the word superfluous and you can get rid of
Sure.
words.
Yeah, yeah.
So all of that really, and a kind of every gradation in between.
Yeah, yeah. So, when you were growing up, did you have a favourite book?
I very much remember the process of learning to read and it being very difficult and boring, and I didn't want to do it at all. So I learned. I was quite late learning to read, and the first books I remember being fascinated with are actually my dad's encyclopedias.
Okay.
And in the back of the last one, there were a whole series of acetate illustrations of human bodies, so that you could go from the outside of a body and then down all the layers.
Yes, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Oh, that was my favourite book when I was probably about 7. And then once I learned to read, once I realised, reading. Oh, right. Okay, I get it now. Great. So, gobbled up books. So I loved, I read Lord of the Rings from cover to cover. I don't know, got to the end, went back to the beginning, got to the end, went back to the beginning, I don't know, about 5 times or something. But I also read Gerald Durrell's books, not just Family and Other Animals, which everybody knows because of the dramatisation, but the early ones about his animal collecting expeditions in Africa and in South America. And they have great titles like The Bafut Beagles and 2 Singles to Adventure, and they were wonderful because they were about travel, they were about countries, they were about animals, they were funny, really funny, they were adventurous, and they had lots of great zoology in them, and they were really, really well written. So I totally loved those books. So
I think that's
battered copies of them, on my shelf.
I think you just kind of described everything most kids want, adventure, animals, humor. Like when you're reading a book as a child, you don't want it to be too much like, oh, I don't really understand what's happening. You want it to be, but also you want it to be real as well. You want to be able to relate to it. Like, oh yeah, I used to get my backpack and I used to go off on little adventure, those kinds of things. Or
you wouldn't be able to put yourself into the pages.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I certainly did that with Lord of the Rings, the bit where Eowyn stabs the Nazgul, challenges the Nazgul. That was me. Gone foul Dimmerwick, if thou be not deathless, I will smite thee. Oh yes, I will. I'll smite you right now.
So if you could do a book that maybe were based on an interview, who would you want to interview in order to write your book?
Oh blimey, that's really interesting. Can I have anybody from history?
Yeah, anybody.
Oh, Charles Darwin.
Oh, of course.
Charles Darwin. Yeah. I'd like to walk with him around his garden and talk to him about his
brains.
Actually, because I've read bits of The Voyage of the Beagle, and I've read a fantastic biography of him, and various other bits and bobs that he's written. He was enormously prolific, but he was nice. I think he was probably a really, I mean, I'd be gutted to find out that he wasn't a really nice person, but he just seemed like a really, really nice man who really cared about his family and his friends. And, he was a product of his time, and he had a few things that we would find a bit ideologically uncomfortable now. But just such the quality of his observations.
Yeah.
And he wrote beautifully.
Yeah.
Really, really beautifully. And to write about, an afternoon with Charlie as my darling, that would be brilliant.
That's brilliant. That's so funny. So is there anything like a moment in time or a moment in history that you think that you would love to develop into maybe a book or a poem or a play?
Wow. Okay. Oh, a poem or a play. There is actually, and it's a really weird thing.
Okay.
That is nothing to do with zoology, really. about a long time ago now, almost 20 years ago now, I was traveling in Ireland, and with my then partner, and we came across this giant telescope reconstructed in the grounds of the castle in Parsonstown in County Offaly. And this telescope was built by the fourth Earl of Parsonstown,
Okay.
right on the eve of the potato famine.
Okay.
And he utilised all the skills and materials from the town and employed a lot of people to build this telescope. It's got a reflective mirror lens that is 7 feet across, so it weighs about 4 tons.
Oh my lord!
It's made of a silver alloy.
Oh
and
wow!
It was the first telescope to see objects outside of our galaxy. And the observations that he made with that telescope weren't bettered until the 1950s.
Holy moly!
It's a fantastic story. And the woman who he married the daughter of an English industrialist, basically for her fortune. But actually,
Wealth,
it wasn't that much. But she was an extraordinary person too. So she persuaded Fox Talbot, who invented, development photographic printing, to teach her how to do it. And so she became this extraordinary photographer who documented the life of their family.
Gosh.
And also she was a dab hand as a welder.
Just why not?
Touring woman. And she had 11 kids or something.
Oh my God.
There are huge gates outside the castle, and she made them, these wrought iron gates.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That would be such a cool play.
The story of the telescope is incredible, because the fact that it had this literally on the eve of the potato famine.
Wow. This
telescope saw outside of our galaxy, and then actually both the Earl and his wife Mary, William and Mary, were involved in helping people and trying to find employment for people in County Offaly to save them from the famine. And then for a while he didn't do anything with the telescope. And then he did again, and it was famous around Europe, and astronomers from across Europe came to look at it. And it's massive. It's like this giant sort of 70-foot barrel.
Blimey.
It's been reconstructed, and you can see the grounds of
That's the play. There it is.
Well, I think it would make a fantastic movie.
Yeah,
And I can't believe that nobody's done it, because it's so fabulously visual, and stovepipe hats and this amazing telescope, and he did the most beautiful drawings of his observations, because photography wasn't good enough for to take photographs of the images that he was getting from the telescope. They weren't stable enough. There wasn't, the shape. So he had to draw them, and the drawings are beautiful, absolutely beautiful, exquisite. And no, it's a great story.
Wow, it is. And like you say, I've never heard of it. So
no.
Oh my gosh. Yes, get on it. Start writing. So lockdown has been pretty crazy. It has been a little bit of a pain in the backside, if we're totally honest. What has kind of kept you going? Have you had projects kind of coming through thick and fast? What have you been up to?
I've had a lot of work right the way through. I mean, normally I do a lot of travelling and lots of work with kids like you do. And at first, not doing that travelling was a huge relief.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm missing working with kids now. But I've been working right the way through. I had a picture book to finish, and then I had this big novel, this big project. And I think, lockdown worked in my favour because I wasn't travelling, so I could just immerse
focus,
and get it done. And that was really great. But I am now really feeling tired.
Yeah. Yeah, you need a break from your break.
Yeah, I'm actually more drained now than I've been ever.
Yeah.
And I frequently do, 6 books a year.
Yeah.
Obviously
Wow.
600,000 word novels, but 6 picture books or poetry books or small novels
Yeah.
every year. And I've been doing that for a long, long time. So this summer, now that we're down in glorious, lovely Pembrokeshire, I think I might take quite a lot of time off.
Yes.
And do a bit of recharging.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? And I think, like you say, sometimes, I was the same. I thought, oh my goodness, this is actually such a nice break. Although we were really gutted that, we were literally a week away from opening our show.
Oh.
But it was like, oh, I know, it was awful. It was terrible. And initially that was like, oh, despair. But then once I kind of had time to think about it, and thinking we'd only be, just a couple of weeks, I thought, you know what, this might be a really great break, because I never stop working. There's always somebody who wants you to do this in a school, or somebody who wants you to write this or perform here, or do this or do that, or even just paperworky bits, that you just can't get away from it. You've got to do it. So yeah, I did initially think, check me out, I've got a bit of time off, because I literally can't do anything else. But I think it slowly becomes apparent that for your own kind of sanity, you have to just keep going in some way, shape or form. So it's like plow on with the work, but then not being able to go places and do things, that little bit of your safe haven, if you like, that bit of getaway time, that bit of, although I am traveling, it means I've got 6 hours on a train where I can just
absolutely 6 hours on a train when you're break, you just nothing going on, all off. and I haven't had any of that for the last kind of 18 months really.
And that's tough. Yeah, for sure, 100%. So my last question is for you. You kind of already answered it really, but what is next for you? Do you have any projects in the pipeline? Are you just going to just chill out and see what happens?
Well, I haven't said that I'm just going to chill out.
She lies.
I've got this book of this poetry collection, which I'm doing with Peta. And then I've got another, I've got a non-fiction picture book to write, which is going to connect botany and climate change and
oh, wow.
Things. So that will be good. And then I've actually got the novel that I've just finished.
Yes.
I really believe in the story, and I believe in the power of its story. So uncharacteristically for me, I'm going to stand up and tell people how marvelous it is.
Yes, you are.
I'm going to do a lot of promotion for that. And also one of the characters that popped into my head, I mean, you know what it's like. You don't know where they come from. They're just suddenly there saying, actually, you thought you were writing about that person. You are writing about me. And
I'm
one
here.
of the characters that popped into my head with this novel, which is called The Song That Sings Us, is a tiger who's a sea captain.
Okay.
And he's a very strange mixture of human and animal. Anyway, the next book is all about him. He's called Scrimsley.
Oh, what a great name!
It's called Scrimsley, and I love him. And he's already telling me all sorts of exciting stuff about his life.
You're invested in him.
The sequel is actually a prequel. It's actually Scrimsley's life before he stepped into this story, The Song That Sings.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That sounds so exciting. That does sound so exciting. So you said you're going to have loads of time off. You're totally not.
You're right. Probably. But I could write the first parts of that on the beach. I can sit on the beach and write.
You can.
And I can walk on the cliff path. And I can think about it while I'm surfing.
Yes, you can. And you can think about it while you sit and eat tea and cake, because that is very important.
Exactly. Sharpening your axe. That's what that's called.
It is. And you can do it beautifully. Do you know what, Nicola? I've had the best time talking to you. Thank you so much.
Well, as soon as we can.
Yes.
We've got to do tea and cake.
We have got to do tea. We've said it now. We've said it now. It's out. Tea and cake for sure. I would love to. I'd love to. I've had such a wonderful time chatting with you and hearing about all your wonderful stories and where you've come from and what you've done and how you've developed your skill and your love for animals and writing and combining it. Amazing. Thank you so much.
I'd love to hear more about your theatre.
Thank you.
And
tea and cake.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, it's a date.
It's a date for sure. Well, we'll keep in touch, absolutely, and I'll send you the link when it goes up. And yeah, take care of yourself, and I'll speak to you soon.
And you.
Amazing. Lots of love. Bye. You too. Bye.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Honestly, amazing that literally on our doorstep we have this wonderful and incredibly talented author. Hopefully we get to meet you in person because you're just down the road. That would be amazing. I've had the best time chatting with you. Thank you so much. And all my very best wishes to you for this next year, next 2, 3, 4 years. We can't wait to see what you produce next. If you are enjoying everybody that has come on my channel so far, please don't forget to click the little bell at the top to subscribe to the channel and make sure that you like and share with everybody because we want to keep sharing some smiles. Make sure you enjoy the sunshine. Take care. Stay safe. Bye.